We like to say here, this is the house that Karen built on the shoulders of Jackie Vaughn. So there are some luminary women that made this possible, and today we're not going to talk about them, but we are going to talk about a little bit of our own history, and we're going to talk a lot about blood disorders, specifically in Black people. And so I'm going to call you up, and once we all get up to the stage, we're going to talk about ourselves a little bit, and then I'm going to get into some discussions. We are being streamed as well, so other people will be able to have access to this discussion. Nate, it's being recorded, not streamed. So after it's recorded, it'll be posted on the CTU website, on the Facebook page. So after it's recorded, it will be posted on the CTU Facebook page. And please drive all your friends and family to the page. I want to bring up, look, this is so funny because I can either leave the glasses on and read, or I don't have my bifocals on. Everybody in here a person of a certain age. Y'all know the dilemma, right? So y'all can all either look like thumbprints and I can read, or, okay, that's what we're doing. So Dr. Christina Barriteau, let's get that right. That EAU at the end of your name. Any French people in your family? There you go, Barriteau, come on up. Y'all clap it up for her. You're going to act like it's 1,000 people in here. Okay, thank you. Dr. Horace Smith, who did tell me on the side she was coming, so he didn't need to be here, so we're going to get him. Listen, because you said yes, and we're so honored that you did, and your people stayed on us. You got very diligent folks. We thank them. Listen. Ain't nothing wrong with a check. Okay, so when you all come up and when you got the mic, Nate told me to tell you all, hand it just a little to the side of your, like this, chin level. Testing. Y'all get all that? All right. Michelle Burgess, who's been with us now 3 consecutive years, the petty. Your petty go deep, principal. So yeah, her husband was with us the first year, and then his wife the next. Yeah, he want to point that out, the blood. All right, Brother Donald Dew from Habilitative Services, can you come on up and join us? And Shermann Dilla Thomas, urban historian. And you know, it's not too late. Y'all can call some of y'all friends that just got off work and tell them to slide. Y'all can do that. I won't, no judgment. Thank you. Appreciate it. All right. And we good. No, that's me. That's it. There you go. All right. So in your seat, you have a microphone. Just gonna, there you go. You over there giving directions already. That's why we got you. See, you over there giving directions already. Look, hey, if the pastor don't know, I don't know who does. Okay. All right. So everybody got their mic on? We good? All right. Now, this is a little bit, but when I asked for you, I did say this, so I hope you read. I said, Dilla, do you think you might want to talk to us about your frat brother? Dr. Charles Drew, give us a little bit about that phenomenal brother in this room. And if you are willing, before we get into our questions, I would love for you to kind of set the stage with that. Okay, or he just gonna do it.
Yeah, he can do it.
Okay, we're gonna stop right here. We're gonna cut this out. It's gonna be me and you. Now, you didn't ask me 3 times. 3 times while you here. So the answer now is to take over. Okay.
Serena said he contributed. I said that's an insult. There would be no transfusers without Charles Drew. And his if you go to Northwestern and go into, again, they have an entire section to him because he is the father. He was ostracized as a black man, was not allowed to go to certain hospitals. He opened up the first transplant unit, and he saved lives in the war because he understood the issue of blood transfusions. And they don't give him enough credit in many of these biographies. They need to give him more credit. He is the reason for blood transfusion.
So we're going to correct that. We're going to correct that. It starts here. So we're going to make sure that we correct that. And so Dilla, the urban historian, if you could please just elaborate on what
No, I
Dr.
really couldn't say it any better. You know, despite the fact that because of his race, he wasn't allowed to train in certain spaces. He understood blood types. He understood the matching of blood types. And he went on to inspire a gentleman of Italian heritage who started the first blood bank at Cook County Hospital. But the linchpin of that was indeed Dr. Charles Drew. So I couldn't say it any better.
So are you talking about Dr. Fontes?
I am.
At the Fontes Clinic is
Yes.
named after Cook County? And so, so Cook County has the blessing of being the first hospital to actually have to be able to store it. And so this correction of history that we're able to sit in right now is there would be no transfusions if not for Dr. Charles Drew. And then finally, had he not trained Fontes, who we have, the Fontes Clinic is named for, we would not, Fantas, and then he's correcting me too. So we just love all of that.
We want to get it right.
We gonna get it right. We gonna get it right. Fantas.
The other folk don't want to get it
That's right. So we gonna make sure we get it right. Am I right now? Fantas.
You want it.
Fantas. Okay. My correction. I want to be right. All right. So we're gonna go from. We've heard so much already, but can you wait to just hear? Okay. We're gonna go from my right all the way around. And if you could just tell us a little bit about why you're participating in our panel on today, I appreciate it.
Yeah, my name is Dr. Horace Smith. I know I'm listed as the bishop of the AFC, and I am, but I've been a hematologist for 45 years at Northwestern. Yeah. I am blessed to have trained Dr. Barton and others over the years, and I applaud you for this panel because you have understood that one of the biggest issues that we're going to deal with today is not just sickle cell as a disease. Unfortunately, sickle cell is seen mainly in people of African descent, and it has this major component of pain, which we have no ability to measure pain. In medicine, you have to understand the symptom, and the only way to do that is to believe the patient. So the emotional, mental, and secondary gains that black folk go through with sickle cell is one of the major reasons why, even though it's the first single amino acid disease discovered in America, it is the least supported financially. So this panel that talks about the behavioral part and the mental part is really important, because if you don't understand these things, then you cannot be a proper advocate for these patients, and they will continue to get poor care. So that's my background. I also pastored a church for the last 45 years on the South Side. But I've been on, again, the staff at Northwestern since 1978.
Thank you so much.
All right, good evening, everyone. I am Dr. Christina Barriteau. Good evening. So I'm Dr. Christina Barriteau. I'm here from Lurie Children's Hospital. I am also a pediatric hematologist, meaning I'm a pediatrician who treats patients with blood disorders. My area of expertise is sickle cell disease, and I am fortunate to have been trained by Dr. Smith, so I'm grateful to be here. I've always been really passionate about sickle cell disease and those who it affects. I think I always knew I wanted to be a physician, but more than that, I wanted to give back to communities that looked like me, and sickle cell disease affects us, right? And so that's always been something I'm very passionate about. I'm also the medical director of the blood bank at our children's hospital that issues all the blood products to patients. So congratulations and thank you to everyone who has donated blood today. And again, I'm grateful to be here, and I'm a proud parent of a CPS student, so thanks.
All right.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
My name is Michelle Burgess, and I am a proud, happy mom to a sickle cell warrior. His name is Michael Julian Burgess, and my son was diagnosed with sickle cell at 20 days old and had his first pain crisis at 8 months old. So I'm so honored to be with each and every one of you on today. I'm honored to have two of Michael's doctors sitting to my right. I'm honored to have my friends sitting to my left and my soon-to-be friends over at the left as well. Thank you all for this opportunity. Thank you all for listening to my story. And I'm also honored to have my spouse of 25 years here today, Principal Burgess. So thank you.
Good evening. Good evening. My name is Donald Dew. I'm President and CEO of Habilitative Systems, Inc. I just want to thank Cook County Commissioner Tara Stamps for inviting me to be a part of this panel because health and wellness is very, very dear to my heart. Why am I on this panel? I can think of a number of different reasons why I'm here. First of all, let me just say that I was born and raised just a few blocks away from here at 1851 West Adams Street. And cut my teeth, doctor, at Miles Square Health Center over 50 years ago. First heard about hematology because I was in medical transporting, specimens from Miles Square over to Rush University Medical Center. So that was just really, really interesting. But what it did for me was really give me an appreciation for healthcare. And more importantly, it gave me an appreciation for access to healthcare. Yes. And that's one of the things that we as African Americans, unfortunately, have not experienced a great deal of. And that's why when you hear about racial disparities and discrimination and so on down the line, it's significant because even with Dr. Charles Drew, he left the American Red Cross because they were discriminatory. And he said, look, if you all are not going to deal with us equally as it relates to something that is not color-based. I mean, blood is red. Red is everybody's body, right? But he's experiencing discrimination here at the American Red Cross. I think he left back in 1950. So it was not long ago that he was still experiencing that level of discrimination. And I think as the story goes, unfortunately, he was in a car accident and died because he could not get a blood transfusion. So how ironic was that? But yet, because of what I've seen in Omega Man, and I'm a proud member of Omega Psi Phi, that's another reason why I'm here tonight, because Dr. Charles Drew was a man of Omega Psi Phi, and back in the day in 1975, Commissioner, 50 years ago today, brothers came to the campus and they talked about why they aspired to be men of Omega Psi Phi. And at the time, every civil rights organization was actually headed by men of Omega. You had Reverend Jesse Jackson of Rainbow Push. You had Benjamin Hooks of NAACP and Vernon Jordan of the National Urban League. I said, well, if Q's roll like that, I want to be one of them, So I'm also here because of that. But the last reason why I'm here is because of mental health, and mental health is something that I've been involved with, embraced for over 40 years now. Let me just say that folks have been asking me for a number of years now, Commissioner, well, dude, when are you going to retire? You've been at HSI for 40 years. You've been at other places for another 15, 20 years. When are you going to retire? I'm like, retire from what? I said, it stopped being a job a long time ago. Wow. What we do is mission-driven. Mission-driven. It's not about a job. It's not about a paycheck. So, that's why I'm here, and the mental health of our folks are so important. In fact, Doc, I've even seen a correlation between, in some cases, blood transfusions and suicide. And so why is that? Why is it that there's a higher rate of suicide among our black youth? Why is it that there's a higher rate of suicide among our veterans? Why is it that we've got so many women in the military are victims of military sexual trauma and they don't access services here at the VA hospital because many times they're looking at folks who represent the perpetrators of the violence that they experienced? So there's a lot to the issue of mental health in our communities. When you think about it, I remember, Commissioner, as a little boy growing up on the west side of Chicago, a policeman put a gun to my head and said, the N-word, if you move, I'll blow your brains out. If I had moved the wrong way or said the wrong thing, I would not be sitting there. And that just happened a few blocks from here. So I look at this community. This community is so important to have it in this community, at this institution. Union. I was just, looking at the great migrations. I mean, black folks came to Chicago in droves in 2 great migrations and came here doing what? Looking for a better life. This was supposed to be the promised land. Chicago points New York, points west. This was the promised land. Why? Because we were traumatized. Over 400 years of trauma and terror we've been dealing with. And folks been asking the wrong question, Commissioner. They keep on asking what's wrong with black folks. I say, y'all asking the wrong question. Not what's wrong with black folks, what's right with black folks. That we've been able to come through all of this and have some level of mental stability and have elected folks like yourself and doctors and agency directors and teachers and all these folks still striving. As Maya Angelou said, we still rise despite all of this. And folks are concerned, going through depression right now because of Donald Trump in the White House. I'm like, look, y'all, we ain't seen darker days than this. Those slave ships was rough. That plantation was rough. We've seen some difficult times. But, you know, and I've also said this very simply. Faith and fear cannot coexist. I asked my good friend, Dr. Carl Bell, I said, can you make sure that what I'm saying is correct from a neurological perspective? He said, oh, yeah, it's true. He said, Carl Bell said, you cannot experience faith and fear at the same time. You got to choose. So what does faith do? It lifts you up. Fear just incapacitates you. Last thing I was just supposed to do an introduction.
You really would, but go ahead. You go.
My bad.
You all the way in the deep now. You might as well do your first closing.
Well, I am related to Reverend Dude. That's another story. But
See?
last thing I'm going to say is this.
Y'all got a little preach at them, y'all.
Last thing I'm going to say is this, y'all. I ain't going to say it's the last thing, but one of the things I'm going to say. Our children, there's nothing in terms of my position more important than our children. Their education, their treatment. Right now, we still have more black children in the child welfare system than any other race. Why is it that our children are the ones who are disproportionately represented in the child welfare and juvenile justice systems? Now, we're expecting, after all this trauma that our children experience in terms of adverse childhood experiences, we expect our children to be able to grow healthy and whole and produce and perform educationally and be able to go on and form a relationship. 60% of the adults right now, 60% of adults walking around have experienced some level of adverse childhood experience or trauma. 60%. And then we're supposed to go on and be productive workers and good spouses and everything else. You know, somebody said, you got to get your mind right. And I'm so glad that medically, you know, the community is embracing behavioral health just as much as physical health right now. It's just as important. It's critically important that we get our minds right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. My name is Dilla. I'm a Chicago historian. I'm also the brand ambassador for the DuSable Museum and chief of their social media. I run Chicago Mahogany Tours, where we endeavor to tell the untold stories of Chicago neighborhoods. And I'm here because Commissioner Stamps can be a lot of things, including a bully, and so she makes me come to stuff all the time. But no, I also, there's certainly a correlation with the history of Chicago and health and the lack of access to healthcare systems and their services. So that's also why I'm here to discuss that.
All right, thank you. Let's give it up for our panel. A couple things. So we know that we're going to be talking about Dr. Charles Drew. And yes, an amazing man of Omega Psi Phi, and we got quite a few Omegas in the house. And let me tell you something. This is not by accident. The Chicago Teachers Union has been very deliberate about making sure that we expand our relationships with members of the Divine Nine. I had to say, listen, if you got 10 black folks with a job that's a professional, 7 of them in a Black Greek-led organization. And so we need to attract them and get them involved in a different kind of way. Because everybody has to be accounted for, right? This is about protracted struggle, and everybody has a role to play. So let somebody else stroll. We need y'all to come in here and take care of some business. Okay, that'll be later. That'll be a little bit later. But also, you may have saw one of my keys, Henrietta Lacks. And if you know that story, then you know that they used that sister's cells without her knowledge, right? But because of her cells, we've been able to have so many advances in medicine. I would love for you to speak more to that, Dr. Horace Smith, if you would. And then finally, what was really important to both myself and to Romel, each year we try to grow and expand not just what we're talking about with regard to blood disorders and sickle cell, but we try to bring in another aspect. So last year when we introduced Henrietta Lacks to this conversation, it was about maternal health. And if you've seen me anywhere recently, I'm saying America has declared a war on women in many ways, right? And so we talked about maternal health and the disappearing labor and delivery rooms across this county that are disappearing primarily from black communities. And so this year, something that's very near and dear to me is mental health, specifically with our young people, very specifically with our young people. This is not my only engagement with Brother Dew. He has also been working with me on my own initiative called Shop Talk, Sharing Hope and Overcoming Pressure, where once a month we take over a barbershop or a beauty shop and provide in addition to food and resources, but a safe space for young people to talk about their mental health. And so today, we're going to talk about the impact of mental health on taking care of either a chronically ill person or that person themselves. What does that do to a family when you are you in and out of hospitals? What does that do to a family when you're seeing these rising medical costs? What does that do to the psyche to see your child in enormous pain and there's literally nothing you can do about it? What does that do to the mind? And so we want to talk a little bit about that today as well. And if you guys got some questions at the end, jump in, the water's warm. Okay. So this is a general question. You all can take a couple of minutes to talk about it. So it says, how does sickle cell disease impact the mental health of individuals and their families? Anybody?
Well, I guess I'll go ahead and take the lead on this one. My husband and I have been going through hospitalizations with Michael since 2008. It started out very manageable, maybe 3 or 4 a year. And then in 2018, the trajectory, it spiked, where Michael was in the hospital sometimes twice a month. Let's just talk about, real talk, you all. So the cost of being in the hospital, the price that you pay just back and forth, whether it's food or gas, making sure that the other children still have what they need while we were taking care of Michael in the hospital, seeing our child suffer and absolutely nothing that we could do about it. Over time, it has chipped away at Michael's health. His mental health is not where we want it to be as of yet. And over time, it has chipped away at my mental health. And I have had to really take some steps to make sure that I don't go any further. And so, in a nutshell, it's like what you said, Dr. Smith, you can't measure pain. If you were to see Michael walking through that door, I don't know why he's not here right now, but walking through that door, you would think, oh, that's that kid. You know, he's kind of swagged out a little bit. He just got his ears pierced, so he's really excited. So you don't think, oh, nothing's wrong with that kid. But if you have a trained eye, you can see the jaundice and the yellow in his eyes, and you just know, man, his skin looks a little pale. But you can't see the pain he's in, the oxycodons that I have in my purse now, the fact that, we're toting opioids constantly, and he's, now struggling with his nervous system because of consistent opioid usage. It does take a toll even on your marital relationship. So thank God we've been married 25 years and we're happy and about to celebrate, but it is exhausting even to any relationship, whether it's with your children, your other children, extended family members. Everything takes a toll. Everything takes weight. And so what my husband and I do is we try to tag team. We pull on people as we can, but people get tired too. So you have to kind of, do a dance, ebb and flow. Who do we call this time? Who do we leave alone for a couple of months? So it is a dance that we do, but we are committed. Michael's a warrior. He's got warrior parents. We're not going to quit and stop fighting for our kid, but the toll is immense, and mental health crisis in crisising children is extreme.
Thank you. Thank you for your vulnerability in that, Michelle. And thank you to Principal Burgess, because he's very open in social media. He will ask for us to pray. He will, his social media community, his social media family, he will say, Michael is in the hospital again. Would you all pray? Or different things are going on. Would you pray? And I think that brings me to a question that I have that is for you, Dr. Horace Smith. What role does community and spiritual support play in the mental health journey of individuals dealing with chronic diseases like sickle cell?
Yeah, I really appreciate them, you and your husband. You guys are the heroes, but let me put it in some national perspective. There are 2 million African Americans in this country who carry the sickle cell gene. Every 400 births in this country results in significant disease from sickle cell or SC or S-thal. The number of persons that are affected it will blow your mind. Piggyback on the fact, as you raised it earlier, Dr. Herrick discovered that the first patient in this country was treated at Cook County Hospital in 1910. But again, the issue of chronicity and chronic disease, you put it in such a perspective. You know, my wife and I are both professionals. We have resources. But if we had a kid with chronic disease, it would be a load on us. Think about this. You go to work every day, but then every 3 days your son says, I'm in pain. And so it is multifactorial. The issue of pain, again, I think is significant. I have advocated for 25 years in our institution that kids with sickle cell disease and pain should not be treated in the ER like regular people. If you have chronic disease, it means that your episodes are repetitive. It should not be you go to an ER and see a new person every time to figure out how to treat you. There should be a file in the ER for every chronic disease patient that says they have this disease and these are the narcotics, this is the quantity of medication, this is what they need to have to be treated. Because when you say there's nothing you can do about pain, that's not true. We have gained so much knowledge in the last 15 years about how to treat pain. In sickle cell disease, only about 10% of those patients are going to have that kind of pain. We have patients at Lurie's who have sickle cell disease and are teenagers. They have never been in the hospital. They have never had a pain crisis. It is not a monolithic disease. So when you know the segment that is most chronic, and you know the ones that we call frequent flyers, then you should not allow people to come and get care, and a new physician has to figure out what to do. That is not good medicine. We know that. And so the issue of advocacy and so forth is to make sure that these patients don't have even, you talk about psychological overlay. So let's say I have sickle cell disease, I come to the ER, but I have learned how to distract myself so I don't appear to be in pain. Those patients learn to come in there acting crazy. Because they act crazy and in severe pain, then they get attention. It's called secondary gain. It should not be in chronic disease. So again, the issue of the psychological, the issue of, as you talked about, disruption of lifestyle and all those things, they can be not totally eradicated, but again, we have to be better advocates for our patients. It is almost, I don't know the word to use, that with sickle cell being the first genetic disorder discovered and almost the least funded in this country. That is ridiculous. And so we have to be better advocates. We should applaud patients and their families. We should make sure, at least at our hospital, we do have what we instituted this about 20 years ago, called day hospital. When you come now, you don't go to the ER. We used to have, you can go right to the floor and get treated with people like Christina and others who are experts in it, and therefore your stays will be cut in half or even less than that. But many cities don't have that access. There are only 10 national sickle cell centers in this country, and they are underfunded. And so again, it is almost astronomical the kind of hoops that parents and advocates have to jump through to get proper care. So Dr. Barriteau and myself, we are vocal advocates. We are vocal advocates because we know, not because of somebody's academic background, but because ethnically and socially and in other ways, we understand and we get it. And if you don't do that, then we get these things. You talked about, Dr. suicide and those things. The correlation of suicide and other things like that correlate almost directly to chronic disease. And yet chronic disease can be ameliorated. 70% of all chronic disease can be handled if they receive the medical care we know how to do now. We don't need a lot of new discoveries. We need to make sure access is pertinent to everybody. So you don't have to fight your life just to get care. That's ridiculous. So you're right. The issue of emotional, one more thing I'll say and I'll be quiet. You've got one kid with sickle cell disease in your family, you got three 3 children. I will guarantee you that they take a secondary hit too. They have to be neglected. I mean, I don't know how we raise 3 kids with no chronic disease and resources. Can you imagine this single mother with 5 kids who barely live above the poverty level, and her kid has sickle cell and she gets labeled? They don't show up on time for clinic. You do it with her situation. Again, we have to understand, again, the depth of chronic disease being, again, I'm sorry, black people who, in medicine at the Harvard Institution years ago, they did a national study, and they showed that you can change the quality of care if the people who care for people look like them.
Wow.
And yet today, there are fewer black men in medical school today than when I started in 1971. There are more black women, but there are fewer black men. And again, that's why this panel, again, I applaud you for all these different areas. You got so many. We could talk about all of them. They're all critical. And so we're going to have to try to understand that these are things that we need to educate our people about. And we need to understand if we don't organize and educate, we're just going to talk about things and not going to change. You got to be revolutionary. You got to be vocal. You know, we don't apologize. When a certain guy said they're going to remove DEI, and I said to my friends at Northwestern, if you do it, you're going to hear my voice. Because we're not going to go back to 1950 because of a crazy man. So I have to stop. I talk a lot. I am invested in what I do. I am invested in it. I'm serious about it, and I'm serious about accuracy, and I'm serious about making sure that the focus is correct, because we have been neglected, because we have been sometimes bought out even by our leaders who don't get it. We've got to do a better job. And so you guys are the heroes, and we hope where you're coming now, you're getting the right kind of care. If you don't, call Christina. Don't call me. You call me too, but call her. You say, Dr. Smith, we need to do whatever. All right, who is it? No, because if you don't, these kids suffer unduly. You know, I was telling them 2 of the patients that I've been there since 1978. 2 of my patients with sickle cell disease are now full-time physicians living with sickle cell disease. We've got to change the trajectory of what happens with these kids, and they have the same kind of intellect and so forth if they're treated properly, and that's important. Let me put this mic down. Don't give a picture of Mike.
No.
Oh, I have a comment too,
No,
just
please,
to kind of
please.
echo what Dr. Smith and Mrs. Burgess were saying, the importance of having an advocate and vocal individuals on you all's healthcare team, you know, regardless of what medical condition is being handled, is really important, because although there have been strides that have been made, right, we know the historical context of this country and of the medical system. You know, there's been books that have been written about this. Medical Apartheid is a book that's been written that talks about kind of the mistreatment and undertreatment of black and brown folks. So I agree with the importance of having a vocal advocate. And as Mrs. Burgess said, you know, sometimes you cannot see the pain that a patient is having. And there are instances where patients are labeled as not really being in pain, or, oh, they're rating their pain as a 10 out of 10, but they don't really look like they're in pain. And so we always try to educate our medical trainees. You know, there's even different like medical rationale for why a sickle cell patient may not look like a typical patient in pain, because 1, as Dr. Smith said, they have chronic pain, and then 2, they have blunting of like their autonomic nervous system, so they might not always have high blood pressure or heart racing when they have pain, but they still have pain, and you have to believe what a patient says. So there's still work to be done, but I agree. I also kind of am very passionate about this work, and we like to treat our patients like family, and so Dr. Smith and I have no problem speaking to our colleagues or others on the medical team. There's always room for improvement, right?
While you still have the mic, and we should have done this, but we're going to do it now, and we kind of just jumped right in with talking about sickle cell, but we did not describe to audience members who may not be clear about what sickle cell does, what is actually happening in the body. So could you elaborate on that?
So sickle cell disease is a blood disorder. So I always like to bring my little diagram of a red blood cell here. So we all have red blood cells in our body, and there's different proteins in this red blood cell. One of the most important ones is called hemoglobin, and it helps carry oxygen all throughout your body. So when you have sickle cell disease, there's a genetic mutation in hemoglobin where your body doesn't make the normal adult hemoglobin. Instead, you make sickle hemoglobin, which doesn't deliver oxygen as well to different parts of your body. It's also not flexible. A typical red blood cell is flexible. It can travel all throughout the blood vessels. A sickled cell gets kind of stiff, and so it blocks blood flow in the vessels. You don't get oxygenation to that part of the body, and it can cause debilitating, severe pain that comes on without warning. The other main manifestation of it is anemia. So we all have red blood cells in our body. They're made and they're broken down, but in sickle cell disease, the red blood cell isn't as stable, and so you have increased turnover and breakdown of your red blood cells too. So the patients are anemic, so they have a very low hemoglobin. If you think about the typical hemoglobin of an adult or woman, might be like 11.5 or 13. For sickle cell patients, there's different types, but their normal baseline hemoglobin can be 6 to 8. So when you think about how much lower that is than a typical individual walking around, it's really important to think about that. And also, it can affect almost every organ in your body system from head to toe, from conditions like stroke. It can affect the lungs, acute chest syndrome. It can also affect your heart, your kidneys. Yeah, you name it. It can really affect any organ in your body.
That's important to remember that blood is needed by, if a cell in your body, I don't know where it doesn't matter where the cell is, every cell has to have oxygen and blood all the time. Sickle cell is so pervasive, there is not one organ system that's spared if you have sickle cell. You don't hear about it, but if you have a kid who's on proper treatment with sickle cell, by the time they're 20, 25, their liver is normal, their lungs are normal. But in other kids, if they don't get the right treatment, even though they don't have pain, they have liver failure, they have heart failure, they have lung failure. Every cell in the body has to have blood all the time. So if you have a condition where the blood's not flowing, then every cell, every tissue, every organ is going to be affected long term. And that's what people forget. They always talk about the pain crisis, which is important, but today it should not be a pain crisis. It should be to make sure that all your organs work when you're 35. There's only one way to do that. That's to get the proper treatment from day one all the way, because the symptom is a late stage issue. Once you have symptoms, stuff has been happening before you had the symptom that causes damage to those organs. And that's, in this day and age, people should be aware of that who are in medicine. And many physicians are not aware of that and don't understand what they must proactively do to prevent damage and not just treat a symptom.
Thank you so much. Let's give it up for them. All right, Dilla, so back to you. How has the history of healthcare disparities in Chicago impacted the care of sickle cell patients and other patients?
While it's such a really poignant question, you can look at it in certain neighborhoods. If you go to Inglewood, there's literally one hospital there in St. Bernard. There was formerly about 6, right? And you can tell when those hospitals left if you follow the census of the demographic shifts in those neighborhoods. So in Inglewood in 1930, there was 90,000 people living in Inglewood. And those 90,000 people had about 5 or 6 hospitals. And so what that meant was that at any point in Inglewood, you could be at emergency care within a mile. And now, if you live in Inglewood and you're on 76th Street and you or your child goes into crisis and you don't have a vehicle, then the nearest hospital, being St. Bernard, is 1.5 miles away. And so what if that's outside? Now we have Uber, right? We didn't have Uber in the 80s and the 70s and the 90s. And so looking at a very long, delayed time to get there. And we know that during crisis, time is everything. The quicker that you get treatment, the faster you can resolve those things. And you can kind of follow that disparity by following the people, what we refer to as white flight, who leave these neighborhoods. And then decade after decade after decade, you see these hospitals leave those spaces. And that's true for North Lawndale, that's true for Austin, that's true for Chatham, and now we're in a space where community activists had to actively fight to get back emergency care and different facilities. Right now, thanks to the work that you're doing and others, for the first time in 25 years, Provident now has specialty care. And so prior to that, if you were a person with diabetes or with sickle cell, then even your nearest hospital was no help to you because they didn't have the specialists that understand the disease that you may be fighting. And so the access and the lack of access is very, very critical. And then added on to that, when these hospitals don't have specialty care or the hospitals aren't there, then they can't educate the community to be support systems for the people who have these various conditions.
Thank you. Thank you. Brother Dew, give us a little bit about Habilitative, because you also talked about historically Black social service agencies.
Yes.
Right? And tell us a little bit about that, but more specifically, can you tell us what Habilitative is doing to kind of stand in the gap to provide some of that care, that mental, emotional support for people who are chronically ill?
Absolutely. First of all, let me just say that many years before I even came to HSI, one of my first jobs at Miles Square Health Center was to actually go into Chicago public schools and screen children for developmental disabilities. And by engaging in fine motor and gross motor testing of these children, we were able to identify whether or not there were in fact any developmental delays that needed to be addressed early. Of course, early intervention was always the key. One of the things that we also found out, and I was just so happy to hear, my sister, about your story about with your child and how you and your husband are working so proactively, for his care. Sometimes, our parents are guilty. They're feeling very guilty about, the birth of a child with a disability. They're feeling, okay, well, what did I not do? In prenatal care. It's my fault that my child has a disability. And we were, really impressing upon our parents, no, it's not your fault. And there's things that you can do about it and engage in right now. So we began doing that. So fast forwarding with Habilitative Systems, we were born out of Clare Christian United Methodist Church. And the very first program that we operated was a program called Wesley Workshop. And it was a sheltered workshop for persons with developmental disabilities. And one of the things that has been so true, and Doc, I'm sure you can attest to this, with all the discussion about healthcare transformation collaboratives, there's still very little discussion about the plight of people with disabilities. And that's just really very significant and really criminal that we're not continuing, since the American with Disabilities Act in 1990, continuing to promote the issues of persons with developmental disabilities in this country and physical disabilities in this country. So, one of the things that we've got to be able to do and have been doing at HSI is working with what we call an integrated model of care. The integrated model of care, embraces both chronic medical concerns as well as behavioral health concerns. So, for example, at HSI, we've got currently 16 different locations serving persons with severe mental illness, substance use disorder, developmental disabilities, and in fact, we've built 120 units of housing for senior citizens, as well as another 5 facilities for persons with developmental disabilities. So we are one of the few organizations in the country that actually are providing affordable housing for people with special needs. So that is directly dealing with race and health disparities in our community and giving greater access. The other thing that we're impacting significantly with our medical partners is the mortality rate. The mortality gap, persons living on the west side in 10 primary zip codes is 5 to 10 years less than folks living downtown. Now just think about that. You've got a major medical district right here on the west side of Chicago, and still you've got a mortality rate of persons 5 to 10 years less than folk living downtown in Chicago. In fact, historically speaking, and I'm so glad that this young brother has got historical perspective, but historical fact. When Martin Luther King was assassinated and the West Side went up in flames, and there's a documentary that's called The West Side Burning. There's another one that we did called Heading West, which traced the migration of African Americans from the south to the west side of Chicago. We often hear about Brownsville, but we don't hear about the black folks coming to the west side. Well, when Martin Luther King was assassinated and the west side was in flames, and from roughly Ashland all the way west to about Cicero Avenue, Madison, Roosevelt Road, Chicago Avenue, all these stores were going up in flames, Rush University Medical Center had to make a decision. They were getting ready to leave the community. They were getting ready to leave, but there was one brother who had been the community relations director for over 40 years at Rush, who basically got the hospital administration to meet with some of the gangsters in the community at the time And there was a truce, and then we said, okay, look, we will protect the hospital. We won't come to do anything adverse to the hospital. Rush made the decision to stay, and of course, the rest is history. They went on to do a lot of great things in the community. But I make a point about that is that we got to study our history because it's so critically important that even when, young folks were sweltering in the heat back in 1990, they talk about 1919, what was happening, with all these race riots were occurring throughout the country. What was going on? Well, in Chicago, folks were just trying to stay cool and avoid the summer heat. And then they were jumped on, because they ran into they began swimming in the wrong side. They're trying to get, some relief from the heat. If they don't get the relief from the heat, they're going to, hyperventilate. Anything's going to go on in terms of the heat exposure, and subsequently, they're in the emergency room. So, one of the things that we've been doing is trying to make sure that we address directly through our medical partners all these issues related to race and health equity and create opportunities for folks to get the health care that they need. The other thing I just wanted to point out very, very quickly is that with social determinants of health, we began doing a lot of screenings, so we're doing screenings, to, really address all those social determinants. And once we found out that there were any concerns in that regard, we got folk in. So high blood pressure, diabetes, mental health, substance use disorders, we were addressing all those in an integrated model of care. And right now, for the last 3 years, that's been one of the most impactful strategies that we've used to address the race and health and inequities.
Thank you. All right. Can y'all? Y'all need cue cards. Okay, this one we clap. Y'all need me to do that? Okay. Michelle, not only did you share with us about Michael and Michael's journey, although I do, from social media and your sharing husband, know that there's been some new advancements in Michael's care, right? There's some things going on in Michael's care. So I want you to talk about that, but I also want you to speak about what you do at CPS, because I find that to be critically important, and how in that role do you, not only are you then the parent, but you're also the advocate, helping parents to advocate. So share with us a little bit about that role.
Thank you. So interesting enough, when Michael was diagnosed with sickle cell in 2008, I decided, and my husband and I decided, that I need to be at home for a while just to kind of set the foundation. And from being, quote unquote, a professional parent, the ones. I used to go to LSC meetings. I would be over the PTA. Oh my God, I was the loudest parent. I was the parent that other parents came to, and asked for information from. So from that professional parent, I became a parent support specialist in the office for students with disabilities at CPS. I never thought that I would be working for the office for students who have disabilities. I'm like, okay, this is me and God talking. God, he's like, yeah. How did this happen? I went to school for broadcasting and journalism. I know. Like, you saw my degree. What's happening? But, there is a scripture that says, I know the thoughts that I think towards you, saith the Lord. Jeremiah 29, verses 11. I'm just going to throw in a shameless plug for the Bible, amen? And from that, I feel like this role that I'm in currently evolved. So there are over 533 Chicago public schools, and our tiny team of 1, 2, 3, we service all of them. So yes, parents that, well, we try. If we are invited, we will go and service each and every one of them as much as we can, meaning that there's equity, meaning that they have access to the parent support specialist team. So I support parents that have children who have IEPs or 504s. I go to meetings and I help the parent develop their voice so that they can advocate for their child. So I'm really shocked that this role kind of came to be. It's kind of fun. Let's see how long I ride this wave, y'all. And so until I'm going back to TV, I'm just letting you know, I'm going back to radio. Yes, I am. And then from there, that's from my husband. He's so supportive, though. And then also you asked me the second question about.
the advancements in his case.
Oh, yes. So Michael is up for curative therapy. Can you all give my son an applause? So basically, he is up for the gene editing therapy, which is brand new, hot off the FDA press. Am I right, doctors over here? And when it was announced, I had about 20 texts. Michelle, there's a cure for Michael. Michelle, did you watch the news? Michelle. I was like, my doctors have been telling us about it for a while. So we have incredible doctors. And I knew, but I also knew that it was still in its formulated stages, so it wasn't something I could talk about. So Michael had a pain crisis in May, last May. That pain crisis was so bad that for a minute, I just remember thinking, okay, God, do you have another plan you haven't really told me about? And it really did a lot of damage to his body and to my mental health. And I told my husband, I said, I'm not right. I said, I know I'm not. I'm off. I'm even walking crooked. I said, I'm just not the same. So Dr. Leem pulled my husband to the side and said, we need to talk. It's time to talk about a curative therapy. So Michael is on the top of the list to receive the curative therapy of gene editing through Blue Cross Blue Shield. We were actually trying to get a clinical trial. Oh my God, we were so excited. I mean, the doctors were pushing us. Get Michael's MRI, get his pulmonary test, get his echocardiogram. Come on, and this was Thanksgiving. They were like, come on. We have no time to waste. And my husband and I were like, just trying to get in Lurie's, and the turkey was half done, and life was just overwhelming. The house was filthy, but I was like, come on, Michael. Just to hear, we're sorry, Mr. and Mrs. Burgess, another kid got the slot. My chief is not in here. He was in this building, Chief Joshua Long. I was in a meeting with him. Now, that's your boss. I almost fell under the table, and I just had to keep my composure. So Dr. C, who is over the stem cell team, said, Ms. Burgess, we're just going to go another route called Blue Cross Blue Shield. But she said sometimes they take a long time with their approvals. So we have gotten our first round of approvals, everybody. Yay! The first, right? Isn't that the generic round? So she was like, the second round is the one we really got to, send a lot of hope for. So that's where we are. Michael will be starting exchange blood transfusions once this approval is in place, meaning all the blood is going to be filtered through like a dialysis machine, and incoming new blood with no sickle cells at all. He's going to be like a normal kid. They're going to do 3 of those. Then if I'm right, they're going to harvest his stem cells, and then they're going to send them to a lab. They're going to edit the DNA in the cells, and then they're going to send it back to Lurie's, and then Michael's got to go through 8 weeks of chemo. And Michael, y'all, is a little vain. He's like his mama. He got a lot of hair, and he likes that. So when Dr. C told him, you're going to have to lose your hair, I've never seen my son melt. I've never seen him melt, and he fought this. He said, I don't want this. I said, yes, you do. He said, no, I don't. I said, yes, you do. But after 8 weeks, then he can get the cells redeposited back into his body, and then over time, they grow out into a new Michael Burgess. So thank you. So that's where we are.
That is absolutely fascinating.
We don't know what this means for prom. We don't know, come on, we don't know what this means for senior luncheon. We don't know what this means for mom and dad's jobs. Uh-oh, did I say that out loud? There you go, there you go.
Yes, sir.
Story, and we celebrate Michael, right? But that same day that Michael got that news, 1,000 kids were not on the list. So we celebrate that. But it's unconscionable that so few. This therapy is very new. It costs over $500,000 per patient to get it done because you have to pay back the research and development costs back to these companies. So again, we applaud it, but at the same time as you gotta, when you got that bad news about the clinical trials, I have a patient who has been waiting with thalassemia for 5 years, who is now 30-some years old, who needs to have this, almost his life or death. So we applaud the advances, but remember, with these kind of political shenanigans that cut people's paycheck and these things, you don't hear about these other kids who are going to have bad outcomes because they cannot get on the list to afford what should be available to so many people. The rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. So we celebrate Mike, and we're going to believe he's going to get the approval and all those things, but there's 1,000 kids who need the same thing who won't get it.
You going to make a comment?
I wasn't really going to add much, but just that it is important to think about the curative therapy options for sickle cell disease, because otherwise it's a chronic condition and there's medications to treat it that lessen the complications, but cure is really important. Gene therapy is a really good advancement, and it was just approved by the FDA a little bit over a year ago. Before that, the only curative option for sickle cell disease was a bone marrow transplant, which is also called a stem cell transplant. But for that, the outcomes are best if you have a sibling who's a match. You can donate bone marrow for that patient. But each full sibling only has a 25% chance of being a match. So we have plenty of families who want to go through the bone marrow transplant process. They don't have any relative who's a match. There's no donors who have signed up in the registry who are a match. So we are optimistic that gene therapy will be an option for more patients, because for that option, you don't need to find a match. Like, the patient is their own donor, and then the cells get edited. But like Dr. Smith said, we are working to try to get that available for more patients, because I agree with that.
Last but not least, I want to say that this particular route that we're going, the insurance route, basically the doctor has said that there has not been any cases, I hope I'm saying this correctly, of leukemia reported after 5 years after the procedure is done. And that's huge, because when we first heard about this, that there's a possibility that 5 years later this thing comes back in the form of cancer, I think I yelled, no, but when you're backed against the wall, we're back against the wall. Like, according to Michael's former hematologist, Dr. Matt, he said that Michael was born with the worst case. And our options are few. So that very thing I yelled, no, now that I hear that the path that we're going with Blue Cross Blue Shield, and there are two paths, clinical trial and insurance, there's a lesser risk of leukemia. So hopes and prayers that this time next year, if Stacy invites me back, we will be telling you all a different story.
We're believing that. We are believing that, and we're going to be believing in Michael and that these therapies work. We're about out of time, but I wanted to go through the panel, and just any last comments you wanted to leave us with. You know that we've addressed a few things, definitely sickle cell, but hearing attalax, and then first, finally, just the impact of mental health on chronically ill people and their families. So if any of you care to speak to the topics as we wrap up.
I will just, my last comment, will piggyback on caveat what you just said, and in all due respect to all of us. Be very careful about your fears. You just made a statement about leukemia. Anytime you get any chemotherapy, there's a chance of leukemia, right? And it frightens parents like you. And so we have to be better informed. Could your kid get leukemia? Yeah, probably 1 in a million. But the sickle cell will kill him. So when you hear about side effects, we really rely on word of mouth and the internet. It's a poor source. When I started training in 1971, the 5-year survival for common leukemia was 15%. Today, that same diagnosis is 90-some%. Why is that? Chemotherapy, radiation, improper treatment. Now, somebody said, but my kid died from chemo. You're right, but 1,000 kids got cured. You got to be careful who you rely on when you hear these buzzwords that frighten you out of your mind. A side effect is a potentiality. A disease is a reality. You've got to get the right kind of information, not from your friends, not from the internet, not from what you read on the side of any medication in America. They tell you there are no side effects, they're lying to you. There is no such thing as a medication or a treatment without potential side effects. But most of the time, to not take the right medicine, it's going to take you out of here. So to black people, even during COVID, we got pushed into all kind of conspiracy theories and things that killed us because we believed the wrong source. You got to get the right source and put it in. I'll tell your son, lose your hair. In 8 months, your hair will be back. But the chemotherapy will destroy the abnormal cells that will take you out of here. You've got to get the current, not your friend's feelings information, or you get sent down the wrong road and you lose out when you could be gaining. So you got to get the right information. You got to do that.
I agree, but let's pull on that thread a little bit, I guess. Yeah. Mike is, no, there you go. Let's pull on that thread a little bit, and just in terms of the misinformation, but not just the misinformation. How do we have conversations in our community, with the community that has reason to be suspicious of the medical industry, okay?
Absolutely.
So how do we both, have two of the conversations where we honor the real legitimate concerns that black folk have when it comes to medicine?
What you're saying is absolutely correct.
Okay.
Most of the time we relate to Tuskegee, right? Let me ask this audience a question. How many remember the Tuskegee experiment? When did that happen? What year? It's been over 80 years. What has changed? She sits on boards at hospitals now that you cannot do that again because folk like us are sitting there saying, hold up, wait a minute. When COVID came out and the fear about the vaccines, where we did not push enough, you mentioned the fraternities of black Greek organizations. Do you not know that every black medical center participated in the development of those vaccines? And the person who owns the first 3 mRNA platforms is a black sister who's 39 years old. So you gotta talk to the people that look like us, who have had the advantage of going to school, and hear them. Because again, you're right. We survive because we do have a healthy misapprehension about academic institutions. But on the flip side, they also have the best therapies that we can get. Find folk that look like us that you trust. Trusted voices should be heard above scare tactics because I see too much of it. I'm not taking that medicine, man. I took that diabetes medicine, man, and this happened. Well, they got some alternatives. Talk to the right people. But we got to stop going to scare sources. I see it all the time. And what happens is we miss out because we do have a healthy misapprehension. Find somebody that looks like you. You can check us out. Go to the NMA, the National Medical Association that black and brown folk dominate. Go to places like the conferences here this year, and you'll find out, you'll get trusted sources that know what they're talking about. They call us big mouths. We have to be big mouths. We ain't got enough mouths enough. Got to tell these folk, don't tell folk not to take their medication. If you go to your doctor, you say, I took this you took this medication and you had a side effect. That's okay. Call your doctor. Say, hey, I took it and I got these side effects. They have alternatives, but just to stop taking it now puts you at risk again, even though you go to see the doctor. We got to protect our health with better information. There's enough of us, there needs to be more, that you can find somebody and say, hey, give me the real story. I said last thing, I got friends who are in high places. They go to Johns Hopkins Medical Center, they go all these places, then they call me and say, hey, doc, what should I do? I always wonder, why do they call me? Man, you went to Yale. Why are you calling me? Because they trust me. Medicine is a trust issue. Medicine is not just an academic issue, it's a trust issue. You can have 18 hospitals in your neighborhood. If you don't trust the people, you ain't going there until you're almost dead. So we've got to work on that whole issue of identifying our own so that we can trust them and not have to wait till the last minute when the tumor is so big we're going to die. So I just want to have a healthy balance. You are correct. We've been mistreated, but there's been some changes too.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, I don't have anything.
I think it's on this slant thing by your chin.
Testing. Okay. Commissioner, again, I just want to thank you for this forum this evening. This has been phenomenal, informational, educational, and inspirational. And that's a very powerful combination. In terms of what I'd like to leave the audience with, I asked an elder this. I said, please, you've lived 80, 90 plus years old. Let me know if what I'm saying is true. That half the battle in life is controlling what goes in the mouth and what comes out. They said yes. So much of what we experience in terms of our health care is under our control. I mean, there's a lot that we can do about it just in terms of our eating habits, our drinking habits, et cetera. So just think about if we taught our children from day one better habits around, nutrition and making good choices and all these different aspects of their social determinants of health, how much more powerful they could be. Let me just say that because the seeds were planted with trusted messengers years ago, over 50 years ago for me, the folks right over here at Miles Square Health Center, my mom was one of those folks who were a part of the Great Migration that came from Louisiana, settled here on the west side of Chicago. She was a domestic, then she became a community health aide. Now they call them community health workers. Went on and became a unit clerk administration at Rush University Medical Center, and also became the coordinator of the venereal disease program here on the west side of Chicago. Now that's what Mama did, okay, with a high school diploma. But because Mama did what she did, she created an opportunity for her 3 sons to continue to do a little bit more. I'm not going to say a whole lot more other than this little boy from the west side became and is currently the first African-American chair for the International Commission on the Accreditation of Rehabilitation Facilities. Right. That happened with the Health Seed Planet. So I thank you.
Yeah, that goes into what I was going to say, even as it relates to the mistrust. A quote I say all the time, my kids are so sick of it, but I say, God bless the person that plants seeds of a tree knowing you'll never sit under its shades. Wow. And so sometimes the answer may not be in our lifetime, and finding that trust may not happen today, tomorrow, next year. And so plant that seed in other folks to say, hey, there are programs all throughout this city where young folks want to be doctors, want to be nurses, and they need help bridging that gap. And if you assist them and help bridging in that gap, then those will become the future trusted sources that we can rely on when it comes to our medical history. So allyship is one thing. Maybe you don't have kids, right? But you're a part of this community. Maybe you don't have a CPS student, but tap into these networks and help support these networks, and we will raise up the future of trusted sources.
Wonderful.
Thank you. I can't help, we are sitting in CTU, and I, from your earlier comment, just about the relevance, people trusting people that look like them, right? And how, are being disserved, and it helps to get the information when that information is coming from someone that looks like you. And we know this as educators. Our children become teachers because chances are they had an incredible teacher that looked like them, right? And because of that encounter, they wanted to go on and do the good work that we do, right? Because I just believe that anything done well, particularly in the area of service, transcends being work, and it does become ministry, right? And so I want to say I can't help but seeing all the dots connect, right? Not only just in healthcare, but in education, in the workforce, all of these areas where we have to be the seeds that plant the trees that we will never set up under their shade, but we got to not even worry about the harvest. We have to sow the seed, right? So thank you all so much for joining us. But before we get out of here, I have the president of this house. Y'all can clap. That's who got the check. President Stacey Davis Gates.
Hey, What a wonderful panel. And I want to honor Dr. Barriteau, Michelle. We're going to organize your 3 people.
Great.
It does, doesn't it? But your family here, because T. Willie is family here.
Really.
Hey, you know where he come from. Principal Burgess doesn't talk about the role that he played in helping to build the power and the possibility of the Chicago Teachers Union. He also doesn't probably talk a lot about the reason why Brandon Johnson was ever an organizer here is because he pointed him in the direction of the Chicago Teachers Union.
Great.
We all get to be used. Commissioner Stamps, Mr. Dew, and then the historian here who is hanging out a little bit at CTU. We appreciate that. Thank you for being here. And is it Dr. Bishop or Bishop Doctor?
I was totally educated in Chicago public schools. I can name every elementary school teacher that I've had, and I tell people it's not the CPS, it's the parents and the community that will make you who you are, and they have made me what I am.
And I want to honor that by saying that that is what fuels this union in this era, is that we believe that the type of transformational change that we need for our young people in our school communities can only come through community.
Yep.
There is not one component of the community that is able to do anything separate and apart from all of the parts of the community. It works together. Yeah. Unity, solidarity, I think is the word we use. And I also want to acknowledge the Chicago Teachers Union Human Rights Committee. I see our members here. Thank you. I want to acknowledge CTUF, who helps to undergird this activity. Thank you. I want to acknowledge our community partners, the American Red Cross.
Right.
This is necessary. Thank you. Thank you. And a couple of things quickly. I just want to acknowledge the fact that it is Black labor that created the thing that we understand as public health. Black labor did that. I'm going to tell this story until I'm blue in the face because I actually think it's one of the most powerful American stories that don't get told the right way. I'm a history teacher. And so what happens is that Black people save America by leaving the plantation. Enslaved Africans left plantations. The Emancipation Proclamation didn't do that.
Right.
The Emancipation Proclamation responded to that. Right, the law always comes after the action.
Good.
So the power of Black labor created the circumstances that broke the back of the Confederacy, which enabled America as we understand it. And what it also enabled was a push for a reconstructed America that offered public health, public education, and the Department of Justice. So everything that you speak about here is enabled because enslaved Africans left those plantations and required these United States of America to have a different relationship with all of its citizens. Everyone gets public health. Everyone gets public education, and the Department of Justice is supposed to be for everyone. You understand that? And so you all are honoring the legacy of our ancestors and the way in which you are connecting the dots and creating the community that's going to keep us both liberated and healthy. So I want to say thank you for living in the image of our ancestors. And I want to claim Michael's healing in this moment. I want to claim that because I read it all the time, and I pray for y'all. And so thank you all for loving CTU, for creating community every year with this. I also want to shout out our rank and file member, Nina Hike, who is a who is a member of CTU and a member of Westinghouse College Prep, and an award-winning, nationally recognized educator. And so thank you. Next year, we're doing this at Westinghouse.
I mean, it'll be quick. I promise. I won't be long. Nina Hike. Well, I'm gonna do the best I can. Nina Hike is a chemistry teacher at one of the greatest high schools in the city, George Westinghouse College Prep. But we happen. There are two quick stories. George Westinghouse has had a partnership with Northwestern Medicine for almost 15 years, and it was through the partnership that I actually learned that there were opportunities for Michael to get different care. And so transitioned to Lurie's because of a partnership between Westinghouse and Northwestern. And of course, Lurie's is attached to Northwestern. Right. Long story short, Nina Hike comes to our team. I think Nina becomes Michael's teacher. We're having a conversation in the hall about his care. We're talking about science. We're talking about being culturally responsive and culturally sustaining. And so I was explaining to Nina that it is important for Michael to receive blood donations from Black people. And it was through that, and I couldn't explain the science because I'm just but she did her own research. Nina Hike did her own research on this particular case. And now we're doing massive blood drives here at CTU and at George Westinghouse College Prep on February 26th. And it's when it takes a village, when we're all coming together, learning together, growing together. I mean, it's something powerful, and it's happening at Westinghouse on Michael's birthday. So, hey.
So next year, we're going to do it with the kids. Next year, we're going to do it with the kids. Again, thank you for all of your work, all of your service, and all of your love. Thank you.
Okay, we'd like to take a picture, of course, but we got a few more announcements. This week is Black Lives Matter at School Week. This is just one of many activities that we're doing this week. Also, at the end of we got a gala. We got another event at the end of the month where we're having a D9 HBCU card night party, and we're raising money for the Karen Lewis Scholarship because we want to send Black children to college to become teachers, to come back and educate Black children. So it's a full circle thing, and we need everybody involved. We need all hands on deck. So if you didn't go to an HBCU and you didn't pledge a fraternity or sorority, that's cool too. Come with your friends and play some cards, have some food, and help us to raise some money so that we can send babies to college to become educators.